The period between 1996 and 2020 is increasingly looking like a long summer. Today, inflation is stubbornly persistent, with core inflation higher than almost every other advanced country in the world. The economy is shuddering to a halt, with negative growth per person last quarter. Negative growth per person last quarter. Labor productivity is in an unprecedented freefall. It grew by 11.4% in the 11 years, or the 9 years or so that we were in government, but almost half of that gain has been lost in a single year, in 1 year. And meanwhile, the government is proposing rapid population growth, 1.5 million immigrants in 5 years, without a plan for housing, services and infrastructure, and that 1.5 million is on top of the natural population growth. Westpac ACCI research shows that 42% of businesses are seeing their margins eroded despite increasing prices. NAB reports that 1 in 3 consumers report very high levels of consumer stress. And ANZ is reporting the longest slump in consumer confidence since the 1990s recession. This is despite an unemployment rate at 3.6% and company profits growing at substantial rates over the year. Now, whether it's on prices or output, families and businesses are united by one thing. They feel like they are working more for less. And the risk is that hardworking Australians trying to get ahead feel like they have become the working poor. The challenge of inflation is not new, but for a generation of Australians, it's unfamiliar. For the last 2 decades, low interest rates, along with strong credit, have meant money, for government at least, has appeared to be free. For governments, advocacy groups and voters, the solution to most problems became as routine as it was predictable. Let government fix it. Let government borrow to pay for it. Sensible people can debate whether that was an appropriate course of action in an environment of low inflation. But with skyrocketing interest rates, stubbornly high inflation and collapsing productivity, this big government approach is a road to ruin. Now, the twin challenges of persistent inflation and sluggish productivity require a strategic and whole-of-government response. The cost is alarmingly human as a local member on the ground, talking to constituents and talking to people right across the country. And it's why this needs to be treated with the same resolve as any other crisis, albeit with a different toolkit. Small business owners like Veronica, whose only choice to keep her doors open is to raise prices or to sack staff. Young mothers like Nicole, who's taken on more hours, spending less time with her young children to pay a mortgage. Pensioners like Josephine, who worries about paying her energy bill through the winter despite investing in solar. Solving all of this, solving the inflation challenge, can't be left to the Reserve Bank. The Reserve Bank focuses the pain on interest-sensitive, hard-working Australians with a loan, while putting the aspiration of home ownership even further away for young Australians. While the RBA is doing what it must, in Canberra we see indifference, or worse, incompetence. Dr. Stephen Kennedy is the Secretary of Treasury as the government's top economic advisor. During Senate estimates, Dr. Kennedy confirmed that after more than a year in office, the Prime Minister has not requested a single briefing from him on inflation or any other economic issue, not a single briefing. And despite inheriting a budget which was in balance between November 2021, when New South Wales and Victoria opened up at the end of the pandemic, through to the election in May 2022, a labour market and a commodities sector so strong a drover's dog could have delivered a surplus this year, we have a Labor government that can't say no to spending more money. So here are the facts. Just 2 months ago, the Treasurer delivered a budget that spends $2 for every dollar saved. Labor spent $185 billion more in its 2 budgets than the last budget of the Liberal National Government. That's over $7,000 for every Australian. That's how much the government spending has increased in that 1 year, an extra $7,000 of spending per Australian. and Labor has spent an extra $3.8 billion in just 1 month since the budget. Is it any wonder that interest rates went up within weeks of the budget, despite the fact that that very budget highlighted the expectation that rates wouldn't increase?